Her name is Hildegard. She is 79 years old, and she lives alone in a 2-room apartment in Halle, in the state of Saxony-Anhalt. The apartment is warm enough in winter, if she keeps the bedroom door closed. On the wall above the kitchen table there is a calendar from her Sparkasse, and below it a small handwritten note she wrote to herself 3 years ago when her husband Werner died. The note says, "Bread, eggs, potatoes, enough." Hildegard receives €952 a month from her Rentenversicherung. After rent and electricity and her small health insurance supplement, she has around €280 left for everything else. Food, transport, the occasional call to her daughter in Dortmund. She does not go to the Tafel, the food bank, because she was raised to believe that other people need it more. This is not true, but it is what she believes, and no amount of government leaflets will change it. What keeps her fed, really fed, not just kept alive, is a single pot. A 20-year-old enamel pot she bought at a market in Karl-Marx-Stadt before it became Chemnitz again. In that pot, she makes 5 different things, depending on the week and what is left in the cabinet. One of those things, the one she makes most often, the one her mother made before her, the one that Germany as a country has mostly forgotten, is something we will get to at the very end of this video, because it is number 1. And it deserves to be the last thing we talk about. What I want to give you today is not inspiration. Germany has enough of that. What I want to give you is 25 real meals that a person can make alone, on one burner, for under €2 a serving, in a kitchen the size of a hallway. Meals that kept this country alive through things that would be unimaginable now, and meals that still work, right now, in 2025, in Halle and Hamburg and Dresden and Cologne. If you know someone living on a small pension, or if that someone is you, stay until the end. 25. Flour soup, Mehlsuppe. Cost, approximately 25 cents per serving. Region, Baden-Württemberg, Bavaria, across rural Germany. Era, 19th century through post-World War II. We begin at the very bottom. Not because this dish is bad, but because it is the most stripped-back thing on this list. Flour soup is exactly what it sounds like. Butter or lard. Flour, water, salt. In some versions, a little onion. In others, a splash of leftover beer. That is everything. In Stuttgart, in 1946, a woman named Gertrude, a Trümmerfrau who spent her days moving rubble with her bare hands, made this for herself and her 2 children every morning before going out to clear the ruins of what had been their neighborhood. She had no eggs, no milk, no bread that week. She had flour. She had 1 lump of lard the size of a matchbox. She made soup. The practical truth for today. Flour is always in the cabinet. This soup takes 8 minutes. 1 pot, 1 burner. For a senior with arthritic hands, the stirring is gentle, and the result is filling enough to take the edge off the morning. It was abandoned during the Wirtschaftswunder because it represented starvation. No one in prosperous West Germany wanted to eat the food of rubble years. That shame is understandable. But the shame is not in the soup. Bread soup cost approximately 30 to 40 cents per serving. Region, Thuringia, Saxony, Lower Saxony. Era, medieval through post-World War I. If you have stale bread, real German Schwarzbrot, Roggenbrot, or even old Graubrot, you have the base of this dish. You break or chop the bread into a pot, pour hot water or thin broth over it, add a little butter and salt, cook until soft. Some families added a fried onion, some added a beaten egg at the end if they had one. In Erfurt in 1948, an elderly schoolteacher named Herr Gottschalk ate bread soup for 11 consecutive dinners. He recorded this in a diary that his granddaughter found in 2003. He did not describe the soup with sadness. He described it with a kind of methodical gratitude, the way a craftsman describes a tool that does exactly what it is supposed to do. For a modern Rentner, stale bread is the thing Germans most reliably waste. In Germany, approximately 1.3 million tons of bread are thrown away every year. Brotsuppe solves that problem and costs almost nothing. Soft enough for anyone with dental difficulties. Reheats well. Can be made from a sitting position at the kitchen table if necessary. It disappeared because bread became cheap and plentiful enough that letting it go stale and souping it felt backwards. The logic of abundance erased the logic of necessity. 23. Semolina porridge, Grießbrei. Cost approximately 35 cents per serving. Region, all of Germany, Austria, Switzerland. Era, always present, but especially during shortages. Grießbrei is semolina, coarse wheat, cooked in milk or water until it thickens into a smooth, pale porridge. A little sugar or salt, depending on preference. Some people add a knob of butter and a pinch of cinnamon. That is it. This is the food of German childhood. Every person over 60 in Germany knows this dish, but somewhere between childhood and old age, many stopped making it. It felt like children's food, hospital food, food for when you are ill. The truth is, Grießbrei is one of the most complete, digestible, inexpensive meals a person living alone can make. In Munich, in the DDR era, and yes, Munich is not DDR, but Grießbrei crossed every border, a retired railway worker named Helmut ate this 3 mornings a week because, as he told his doctor in 1987, it was the only breakfast that stayed with him until lunch. For today, a 500-gram bag of semolina from Aldi costs around 0.79 euros and makes approximately 14 servings. That is porridge for 2 weeks of mornings for under €1. 1 pot, 6 minutes. No lifting. Grießbrei disappeared from adult German kitchens because prosperity brought yogurt, muesli, and bakery rolls. It will outlast all of them. Buttermilk soup cost, approximately 50 cents per serving. Region, North Germany, Schleswig-Holstein, Hamburg, Mecklenburg. Era, 18th century through mid-20th century. In northern Germany, before refrigeration and supermarkets, buttermilk was the liquid left over after churning butter. Thin, slightly sour, nutritious, practically free if you kept a cow or knew someone who did. It was heated with a little flour to thicken it, sweetened with sugar, or mixed with berries in summer, eaten with a piece of dark bread. In Hamburg in 1921, during the hyperinflation year before the Great Crash of 1923, a dock worker's wife named Hannah made buttermilk soup twice a week because it was cheaper than almost anything else. You can still find buttermilk in any German supermarket today, a liter for around 0.69 euros at Lidl. This is a soup that does not feel like poverty food once it is in front of you. It is cooling in summer, warming in winter. It has a gentle sourness that makes it feel alive. For seniors with digestive sensitivities, the probiotics in buttermilk are genuinely useful. 1 pot, 10 minutes. The kind of soup that surprises people the first time they try it. It faded from German kitchens because buttermilk became associated with dieting in the 1970s and 1980s. Something thin women drank, not something families ate. That was its quiet death. Potato and herring, herring mit Kartoffeln. Cost, approximately €1.20 to €1.50 per serving. Region, North Sea coast, Baltic coast, Hamburg, Kiel, Rostock. Era, 18th century onward, salted herring, Bismarckering, Matjescherring, or plain pickled herring, served alongside boiled Pellkartoffeln with a little onion and vinegar dressing. This is one of the oldest working-class meals in northern Germany. It required no cooking beyond boiling the potatoes. The herring came from a jar or a barrel. In Kiel in the 1950s, a fisherman's widow named Ingeborg ate this every Friday. Not from religious habit, but because she bought the week's herring on Thursday at the market when the price came down before close. Her daughter remembers watching her peel the potatoes with a single knife that never left the kitchen counter, the radio playing, the window overlooking the courtyard where the neighbors' children played. For today, jarred herring at Aldi or Lidl costs around €1.29 and provides 2 servings. Potatoes are the cheapest vegetable in Germany. Together, this is a meal under €1.50 that contains real protein, good fats, vitamins. Herring is one of the most nutritionally complete foods available in a German supermarket at any price point. It was abandoned in the south of Germany as too northern, too smelly, too old-fashioned. In the north, it survived longer, but retreated from weekday eating as prosperity brought fresh fish and easier options. The herring never stopped being excellent. Germany just stopped paying attention. Germany has more than 4 million seniors living alone. That number is not going down. When we talk about these meals, we talk about cost and nutrition, but that is only half of it. The other half is this. When grief makes everything feel impossible, when the person you cooked for is gone, when the kitchen feels too large, when making a full meal feels like an act of defiance against an empty chair, a single pot on a single burner is sometimes the only thing that makes cooking feel possible at all. Hildegard in Halle doesn't make her Eintopf because she is a thrifty person. She makes it because the act of stirring a pot, the smell of onion softening, the warmth of standing at the stove, these things make her present in her own kitchen again. The pot is not just food, it is continuity. It is proof that she is still here. That is worth saying before we continue. Red berry compote with bread cost, approximately 60 to 80 cents per serving. Region: North Germany, Schleswig-Holstein, Hamburg, the Hanseatic cities. Era: 17th century onward. Rote Grütze, literally red groats, is a thick, jammy compote made from whatever red or dark berries are available. Currants, raspberries, cherries, plums, cooked down with a little sugar and thickened with potato starch or semolina. Eaten warm or cold, with a piece of dark bread or, when there was something richer, with a small pour of cream or a spoon of quark. In Lübeck in 1919, a widow named Frida made Rote Grütze every August when the currants in the small garden behind her building were ready. She bottled some, ate the rest throughout September, and stretched it with dried fruit in winter. She told her grandchildren it was the meal that tasted most like being alive. For today, frozen mixed berries at Aldi cost around 1.49 euros per 750-gram bag. A serving of Rote Grütze made from frozen berries costs well under €1 and provides real vitamin content. Thickened with a tablespoon of potato starch that costs almost nothing. Can be made sitting down. Reheats beautifully for 3 days. It never entirely disappeared, but became a restaurant dish, presented in small glasses as a dessert for €12. The everyday version, eaten as a light supper or a sustaining breakfast with bread, mostly vanished from working homes. That is a loss worth reversing. 19. Turnip soup. Cost, approximately 50 to 70 cents per serving. Region, all of Germany. Era, 1916 to 1917. Turnip winter, World War II. This entry cannot be written without stating clearly what Steckrübensuppe is. It is the soup of survival at its most extreme. During the turnip winter of 1916 to 1917, the Steckrüben winter, the grain harvest failed, the potato harvest failed. What remained, in enormous quantities, were turnips. Germany's civilian population, hundreds of thousands of people, subsisted almost entirely on turnip soup, turnip bread, turnip jam, raw turnips for the better part of 2 winters. Approximately 700,000 German civilians died of malnutrition and related causes during this period. To eat Steckrübensuppe today is to eat the food of that memory. A retired teacher in Braunschweig named Waltraud learned this recipe from her grandmother, who had survived the Steckrüben winter as a child. She made it every November, not with grief, but with something closer to respect. She added smoked speck when she had it, caraway seeds always, a splash of vinegar to cut the earthiness. Turnips today are cheap, under 0.80 euros per kilogram at most German markets, even less in autumn. Turnip soup with a little smoked pork and broth is genuinely good, earthy, warming, filling. For seniors, the soft texture after long cooking is ideal. 1 large pot lasts 3 to 4 days. This dish was not abandoned. It was buried. Germans who lived through the Steckrüben winter could not eat it without returning to the worst memory of their lives. Their children understood. Their grandchildren largely never learned it. There is a difference between forgetting and deliberately not teaching. Barley soup cost, approximately 60 to 80 cents per serving. Region, Prussia, Saxony, Thuringia, Brandenburg. Era, 18th century through DDR era. Pearl barley, Graupen, is one of the oldest and most sustaining grains in German cooking. Graupensuppe is made by simmering pearl barley in broth or water with whatever vegetables are available: carrot, celery, onion, sometimes a piece of smoked meat for flavor. It thickens as it cooks, becoming something between a soup and a stew. It is incredibly filling. A small bowl is a complete meal. In East Berlin in 1978, a retired factory worker named Oskar ate Graupensuppe on the 3 days each week when fresh meat was not available at the Konsum store near his apartment. He made a large pot on Sunday, ate it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. He seasoned it with dried marjoram from his windowsill pot, and a little mustard stirred in at the end, a trick his mother had taught him. For today, a 500-gram bag of pearl barley at Rau or Lidl costs around 0.79 to 0.99 euros. It expands enormously during cooking. A single bag makes 8 to 10 generous portions. Combined with a liter of vegetable broth, around 0.50 euros at Aldi, and 2 carrots, this is a pot of food for a week that costs under 2.50 euros total. Graupensuppe disappeared from prosperous West German kitchens because pearl barley looked and felt like wartime food. In the DDR, it remained common longer because DDR grocery stores stocked grains reliably when fresh meat was scarce. After reunification, East Germans were told their food was backwards. Many believed it. 17. Potato pancakes cost approximately 0.60 to 0.90 euros per serving. Region: Rhineland, Westphalia, also nationwide. Era: 19th century onward. Grated raw potato, egg, a little flour and salt, formed into flat rounds and fried in oil until golden and crisp outside, soft inside. Known as Reibekuchen in Cologne and the Rhineland, Kartoffelpuffer in Bavaria, and most of the rest of Germany. Eaten with applesauce, with sour cream, or simply with a little salt. This is a dish that sounds celebratory. You find them at Christmas markets, at Rheinkirmes fairs, at village festivals. But in the Rhineland coal country, around Aachen and Düren in the 1930s and 1940s, Reibekuchen was what miners' families ate when potatoes were plentiful and meat was not. The egg was the protein, the potato was the substance. The oil was sometimes the most expensive ingredient. A widower named Karl in Cologne, now 81, told his Sozialarbeiter that Reibekuchen was the only hot meal he made himself after his wife died. He said the grating was hard on his hands, but that standing at the stove watching them turn golden made him feel like a human being again. For today, requires only a grater, a pan, oil, 1 egg, and 2 large potatoes. Under €1. The limitation for some seniors is the grating. A food processor with a grating disc solves this entirely. 1 serving is 2 to 3 pancakes. This is a meal, not a side dish. Split pea soup cost, approximately 70 to 90 cents per serving. Region: Prussia, Saxony, Brandenburg, nationwide. Era: centuries old. Army staple: Franco-Prussian War, WWI, weight Tourne, split peas, onion, carrot, celery, bay leaf, water, some pork if available, a smoked speck rind, a piece of casseler, even just the rind of a cured sausage simmered in and removed. This soup was fed to the Prussian army for 200 years. It was the standard ration in field kitchens. It is deeply nutritious, very filling, very cheap. In Leipzig in 1946, in a street-level apartment with 4 families sharing a single kitchen, a woman named Lieselotte made Erbsensuppe every Sunday using split peas she had stored through the worst months of the war. She had learned to keep a bag of dried peas as a last reserve, the final tier of the food supply that even the worst shortages could not entirely eliminate. For today, a 500-gram bag of yellow split peas from Roe costs around 0.79 euros, with 1 onion, 2 carrots, and a smoked sausage end or a piece of casseler around 0.80 euros. This makes a pot of 8 portions for under 1.60 euros total, 20 cents a serving. No soaking required if you cook long enough. Extremely soft texture, can be blended smooth if chewing is difficult. Erbsensuppe never entirely disappeared. It survived in school canteens and army mess halls and Autobahn rest stops. But the home version, the Sunday pot that kept families through the week, became something people ordered rather than made. The difference in cost between a pot you make and a tin you open is approximately 4 to 1. 15. Oat soup. Cost, approximately 0.20 to 0.35 euros per serving. Region, nationwide, especially rural areas, Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg. Era, 18th century through post-World War II, rolled oats or oat groats simmered in water until they break down into a thick, smooth gruel, seasoned with salt or sweetened with a little honey or sugar, sometimes a knob of butter, eaten for breakfast, eaten for supper, eaten when there was nothing else. In German, this was also called Haferschleim, oat slime, a name that doesn't help its reputation. In Nuremberg in 1923, during the hyperinflation crisis when a wheelbarrow of Reichsmark could buy half a loaf of bread, a bookbinder named Fritz kept his family fed through the worst weeks on oat soup and black bread. He wrote in a letter to his brother in Munich, "We eat Haferschleim, and we are alive, and we will get through this." For today, a 500-gram bag of Haferflocken at any German supermarket costs between 0.49 and 0.79 euros. This makes approximately 14 servings. Per serving, this is perhaps the cheapest hot food on this entire list. It contains real soluble fiber, the kind that is genuinely good for cholesterol and digestion. For seniors with sensitive stomachs, this is one of the gentlest possible hot meals. It reheats perfectly. It can be made in 6 minutes with nothing more than a small pot and a wooden spoon. It disappeared from German adult eating because muesli and packaged cereals arrived in the 1970s with marketing that made oats feel like health food. something you spent money on, not something you spent nothing on. The homemade hot version went with it. Black bread soup cost approximately 30 to 45 cents per serving. Region: all of Germany, especially the north and east. Era: medieval through post-Poitwein. Dark German rye bread, Schwarzbrot, Roggenbrot, chopped or torn into a pot with water or thin broth, a little fat, an onion, salt, cooked until the bread dissolves and the soup becomes thick and dark and deeply savory. In some regions, caraway seeds. In others, a little vinegar. In the richest versions, a fried egg on top. In Hamburg, during the second winter after the war, a woman named Berta made Schwarzbrotsuppe for herself and her mother every night for 3 months. She told her daughter 40 years later that she had eaten it so many times that she could tell by smell alone whether it was ready. She said this without sadness, the way a person describes something they are simply good at. For today, German Schwarzbrot does not go bad in the traditional sense. It dries. Dried Schwarzbrot in soup is indistinguishable from fresh Schwarzbrot in soup once cooked. A loaf of Lidl rye bread costs approximately 1.29 euros. One serving of Schwarzbrotsuppe uses perhaps a fifth of a loaf. This is food from the part of the bread most people would throw away. It vanished when bread became cheap enough to simply buy more. The entire logic of bread soup depends on a world where throwing food away is unthinkable. Germany has largely lost that logic. It is worth recovering. 13. Potato soup cost, approximately 70 to 1 euro per serving. Region: everywhere in Germany. Bavaria, Saxony, Rhineland, Prussia, all of it. Era: always. We come now to the true center of German cooking. Not in the way that sauerkraut or bratwurst is famous. Those are festival foods, the Germany of Christmas markets and beer gardens. Kartoffelsuppe is the Germany of Monday evenings and Friday lunches and the last week before payday. Diced potato, onion, carrot, leek when available, a piece of smoked sausage or speck or nothing at all, broth or water, bay leaf, salt, marjoram. Cooked until the potatoes are completely soft, then either left chunky or partially mashed with a fork to thicken the liquid. Some people add a small spoon of mustard at the end. Some add vinegar. Some add cream. There is no single recipe for Kartoffelsuppe. There are as many versions as there are grandmothers. In every case, the logic is the same. The potato is the meal. Everything else is flavor. In Munich, in 1957, a factory worker named Erika made Kartoffelsuppe on the first Monday of every month because it was the day before payday and the refrigerator was at its emptiest. She had a bag of potatoes under the counter. Always, potatoes were her insurance. For today, 2 kilograms of potatoes at Aldi cost around 1.49 euros. 1 onion is 0.15 euros. 2 carrots are 0.20 euros. A portion of Kartoffelsuppe from this pot costs under 0.60 euros. It can be made on one burner. It reheats for 3 days. The texture after reheating is, if anything, better than the first day. It is the most forgiving recipe in the German kitchen. Kartoffelsuppe never entirely disappeared, but the weekly pot, the pot you made on Sunday and ate through the week, became the version you ordered at a restaurant or bought in a jar from a supermarket shelf. Something was lost in that translation. It was not the potatoes. Boiled potatoes with quark cost approximately 60 to 80 cents per serving. Region: all of Germany, especially DDR East Germany. Era: post-war through present Pellkartoffeln, potatoes boiled in their skins, eaten with a generous spoonful of quark. The fresh German curd cheese, something between yogurt and cream cheese in texture, mixed with chives, salt, and a little caraway or linseed oil if available. That is the entire dish. 2 ingredients: a pot of water and a spoon. In East Germany, this was one of the defining meals of ordinary life. Quark was always available in DDR stores, reliably priced, high in protein. Potatoes were the backbone of the Eastern German diet from the 18th century onward. Together they were lunch, dinner, supper, not a diet of despair, but a diet of practicality that happened to be genuinely nutritious. A woman named Rosemary in Karl-Marx-Stadt, now Chemnitz, ate Pellkartoffeln mit Quark twice a week throughout the 1970s and 1980s. After reunification, when she told her new West German neighbors what she ate, they smiled in a way she found condescending. She stopped mentioning it, but she never stopped eating it. For today, quark at Aldi costs around 0.89 euros for 500 grams, enough for several servings. Potatoes are always cheap. Total cost per serving well under €1. High in protein, filling, quick, requiring nothing more than a pot of boiling water and a knife. This dish carries the dignity question at the heart of German reunification. The West told the East, your way of life was backwards. The East, in many cases, believed it. The Pellkartoffeln mit Quark was not backwards. It was and is one of the most perfectly economical meals in the German kitchen. The condescension is the thing that should have been abandoned, not the quark. 11. Lentil soup cost, approximately 50 to 80 cents per serving. Region, Swabia, Baden-Württemberg, also Thuringia and nationwide. Era, medieval onward brown lentils, onion, carrot, celery, a piece of smoked sausage or speck, vinegar to finish, bay leaf, thyme, salt. The Swabian version, Linsen mit Spätzle, where handmade egg noodles are stirred in at the end, is one of the great dishes of German cooking. Full stop. At any price point. The simple lentil soup without Spätzle is deeply filling, rich in protein and iron, and costs almost nothing. In Tübingen, in 1923, during the hyperinflation period, a professor at the university named Dr. Hauser noted in a letter that lentil soup was the one thing he could reliably afford throughout the crisis, because dried lentils, unlike bread, unlike meat, held their price through even the worst weeks of inflation. Dried lentils, he wrote, wait for you without demanding payment. In the Gastarbeiter communities of Stuttgart in the 1960s and 1970s, Turkish workers brought their own tradition of mercimek çorbası, red lentil soup, which slowly blended with the Swabian tradition. Swabian housewives and Turkish grandmothers discovered they were cooking the same meal with slightly different spices. This cross-cultural poverty kitchen has never been properly celebrated. It should be. For today, a 500-gram bag of brown lentils at any German supermarket costs 0.79 to 0.99 euros and makes 10 to 12 portions. Unlike split peas or beans, lentils require no soaking. They cook in 35 minutes. Total cost per serving under 0.80 euros. One of the highest protein contents per euro of any food in a German supermarket. No lifting required. Reheats perfectly, thickens as it sits, tastes better the second day. Linsensuppe was never entirely forgotten, but it was reduced, from weekday staple to occasional dish, from the pot that fed a family for 3 days to something you thought about on cold Sundays. This video is a request to think about it on more days than that. Mashed potatoes. Cost, approximately 50 to 70 cents per serving. Region, all of Germany. Era, always not the restaurant version with cream and butter. The real version, potatoes boiled until completely soft, mashed with a fork or a Kartoffelstampfer, the simple press, with hot milk or broth and a knob of butter or lard. Salt. Nothing more unless there is something more available. Sometimes a fried onion folded in, sometimes a soft-boiled egg alongside. Stampfkartoffeln is not a soup and not quite a complete one-pot meal on its own, but paired with any of the soups on this list, or with pickled herring, or with a fried egg, it becomes one of the most satisfying and inexpensive dinners in German cooking. It is soft enough for anyone. It reheats by adding a splash of water or milk and stirring over low heat. It does not require a recipe, only practice. A retired Ruhr Valley miner named Günther in Bochum ate Stampfkartoffeln with Spiegelei, fried egg, every Wednesday for decades. His wife had made it on Wednesdays. After she died, he kept the Wednesday tradition. He told his son it was the meal that made Wednesday feel like something other than the middle of the week. Potatoes in Germany cost approximately 0.69 to 0.99 euros per kilogram. For 2 large portions of Stampfkartoffeln, you need perhaps 600 grams. The total meal costs under €1. This is nutrition that has kept working-class Germany fed through 2 world wars, a hyperinflation, a division, and a reunification. It is humble, and it is extraordinary. 9. Sauerkraut with bacon cost, approximately 80 to €1, 20 per serving. Region, Bavaria, Rhineland, Saxony, throughout. Era, medieval onward sauerkraut, fermented shredded cabbage, braised slowly in a pan with a little water or broth, a piece of smoked speck or bacon, juniper berries, bay leaf, and caraway seeds, eaten with boiled potatoes or a piece of dark bread. This is one of the defining flavors of Germany and one of its oldest preservation technologies. Sauerkraut was how German households preserved their autumn cabbage harvest for the entire winter. Before refrigerators, before supermarkets, every cellar had a fermenting pot or a barrel. It provided vitamin C through the months when no fresh vegetables grew. German sailors took it on voyages. For the same reason British sailors took limes. It was survival food that happened to taste extraordinary. In a Bavarian farmhouse near Landshut in 1944, a farming family named the Hubers made it through the worst winter of the war, largely because they had 3 barrels of sauerkraut in the cellar and enough smoked pork to flavor it. The father wrote in his farm record, "Sauerkraut, Kartoffeln, Speck. We need nothing else." For today, yard sauerkraut at Aldi costs €0.49 per 520 grams, one of the cheapest items in any German supermarket. A small piece of speck costs around €0.80 and flavors 3 to 4 servings. Braised sauerkraut with speck and potatoes comes to around €1 per serving. It provides genuine probiotics. It reheats perfectly. The smell alone makes a kitchen feel inhabited.